The air in the room was thick enough to drown in. It tasted of rust and ozone, of something ancient and angry being woken from its slumber. In the center of the floor, a circle drawn in gray ash pulsed with a light that wasn't there. It was a black light, a void that swallowed the flicker of the tallow candles. Tonight they were not just trying to kill a man. They were trying to erase a soul from the book of life. They were trying to assassinate Captain Ibrahim Traoré. And they were using black magic to do it. The Bakr, the sorcerer, his face a mask of scars and shadows, held a clay doll aloft. It was crude, but it was him. Dressed in a scrap of red fabric, the color of the beret Traoré always wore. A single strand of hair, stolen, was pressed into the clay scalp. The final link. The whispers began. A guttural chant that coiled in the suffocating air like a serpent. A name. His name. Ibrahim. A curse of fire. Ibrahim. A curse of failing lungs. Ibrahim. A curse of a silent throat. They were pouring all their hatred, all their fear, into this mud effigy, believing it would travel across the night and find the heart of the man who defied them. They believed they were forging a weapon. They had no idea they were building their own tomb. Because in that moment, as the final word of the incantation was spat into the darkness, the spell felt the target. It sensed his spirit, and it was rejected. It recoiled. And with nowhere to go, the serpent, hungry and blind, turned back towards the scent of its own masters. The spell had backfired. This wasn't just a political battle anymore. It had become a war fought in the shadows, on a plane most people refuse to believe exists. But the men who conjured this evil would soon learn a terrible truth. When you try to curse a man protected by the love of millions, the curse doesn't just vanish. It comes home. Before we uncover the full, terrifying story of the men who were devoured by their own dark ritual, hit that subscribe button. Because you need to understand how the purest defense can become the most devastating weapon. This story isn't about the occult for the sake of horror. It's about a clash of two worlds. The world of old power, of secret handshakes and stolen wealth, and the world of new hope, embodied by one man who dared to stand up and say, "No more." That man is Captain Ibrahim Traoré. And to understand the poison his enemies chose to use, you must first understand the medicine he represents to his people. His rise was not supposed to happen. In the grand chess game played by global powers for the soul of Africa, a piece like Ibrahim Traoré was never meant to be on the board. He was a captain, a professional soldier, known for his competence on the battlefield, not his political ambition. He was quiet, observant. He watched as his country, BurkinaFaso, a land of dignified, resilient people, was bled dry. Bled by corruption from within, and by exploitation from without. He saw the strings being pulled from thousands of miles away, in glittering foreign capitals, by men who saw his homeland as nothing more than a line item on a balance sheet, a source of gold, of uranium, of strategic importance. He felt the collective sigh of his people. A sigh of exhaustion. They were tired of leaders who spoke of sovereignty but knelt before foreign ambassadors. They were tired of seeing their resources shipped away while their children went hungry. They were tired of promises that turned to dust. Traoré didn't see himself as a savior. He saw himself as a son of the soil, and the soil was crying out. When the moment came, in September of 2022, it wasn't a grab for power. It was a response to a vacuum. A tipping point where the will of the people and the frustration of the army merged into a single, decisive act. He didn't enter the presidential palace with a list of demands for himself. He came with a vision for his country. And his first actions sent shockwaves through the established order. He spoke in a language they had forgotten. The language of dignity. "We must stop being a nation that begs," he said, his voice calm, but with the unyielding force of a river. "We must produce what we consume and consume what we produce." It sounded simple. It was revolutionary. He tore up colonial-era contracts that favored foreign corporations. He expelled foreign troops that had occupied his land for years, offering little in return but instability. He looked his people in the eye and told them, "Our greatest resource is not the gold beneath our feet, but the spirit within our hearts." He traded the gilded limousine for a standard military vehicle. He was seen not in lavish banquet halls, but in dusty fields, talking to farmers. He wore his simple camouflage fatigues and his red beret not as a costume, but as a uniform of service. The red beret became a symbol. It was the color of defiance, of sacrifice, of a new dawn. People began to wear red berets in the streets. It wasn't a cult of personality. It was a movement of solidarity. They saw in him not a ruler, but a reflection of their own aspirations. This was his real power. It wasn't in the guns his soldiers carried. It was in the hope he ignited in the hearts of millions. Hope is a force of nature. It can't be bought. It can't be negotiated with. And for those who profit from hopelessness, it is the most dangerous threat of all. And so, in the shadows, the vultures began to gather. They met in places Traoré would never enter. The air-conditioned penthouse suites of Ouagadougou. The secluded villas with high walls and private security. The exclusive clubs where whiskey costs more than a farmer's monthly earnings. They were the ghosts of the old regime. Men whose fortunes were built on the broken back of their own country. There was the mining magnate, whose contracts Traoré had just cancelled, costing him billions. There was the old politician, a man fluent in the art of the double-cross, who saw his path back to power blocked by this incorruptible soldier. There was the fixer, the middleman for foreign intelligence agencies, whose influence evaporated the moment Traoré declared BurkinaFaso would be master of its own destiny. Their conversations were a cocktail of fear and condescension. "This boy," the politician would sneer, swirling his drink. "He thinks he can undo 100 years of reality with a few populist speeches. He's a child playing with matches." "He's not a child, he's a problem," the magnate would counter, his voice tight with fury. "A problem that is costing us everything. Every day he remains in power, our world shrinks." The fixer, always the quietest, the most pragmatic, would let them vent. He'd seen this before. A popular leader, a wave of nationalist sentiment. It was a fire, and fire needed to be starved of oxygen. "We've tried everything," he finally said, his voice a dry rustle. "We funded the protests, but they fizzled out. The people support him. We spread disinformation, but he speaks to them directly, and they believe him. We tried to bribe his inner circle, but they are loyal. Our conventional methods are failing." A heavy silence fell over the room. The clinking of ice in a glass sounded like a death knell. They had reached an impasse. Their modern tools of subversion, money, media, political maneuvering, were useless against a man who wanted none of their money, controlled his own narrative, and rejected their political games. Their system was crashing against a wall of integrity. It was the politician who first gave voice to the darkness that was festering in their hearts. He leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. "If modern methods have failed," he whispered, "then perhaps we must turn to older methods. More traditional methods. Methods this land understands." The magnate looked at him, confused. "What are you suggesting? An assassination? We can't get close enough. The man is surrounded by fanatics." "I'm not talking about a bullet," the politician said, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. "A bullet can be traced. A bullet creates a martyr. I'm talking about an act of God. A sudden illness. A tragic accident. Something that cannot be blamed on us, but which removes the problem permanently." The fixer understood immediately. He had operated in West Africa for decades. He knew that beneath the veneer of modernity, the old beliefs still held immense power. The belief in curses. In juju. In the power of a bakr to reach across any distance and touch a man's soul. "You mean black magic?" the magnate breathed, a flicker of fear mixed with excitement in his eyes. "I mean a spiritual solution to a political problem," the politician corrected him smoothly. "We find the most powerful practitioner, the most feared. We give him a name. We give him a price. And we let the spirits of the earth do what our guns and our gold cannot." The idea hung in the air, seductive and profane. It was an admission of their own impotence. They, the men of wealth and influence, the supposed masters of the modern world, were now resorting to the very superstitions they publicly mocked. Their desperation had stripped them of their arrogance, leaving only a raw, primal need to destroy the man who had humbled them. The fixer nodded slowly. I know a man, he said. He does not live in the city. His name is not spoken in the light of day. But they say his curses never fail. They say he can make a healthy man wither like a leaf in the dry season. They say he can turn a king into a madman. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. But his price is high. And it is not always paid in money. The decision was made. They would not fight Traoré on his terms, the terms of patriotism and popular will. They would drag him down into the mud, into a battle of unseen forces, believing their malice was the stronger power. They were about to make a pact with darkness, utterly blind to the fact that the darkness demands a piece of you in return. The journey to find the Bakr had begun. And with every step they took, they were walking further away from salvation and deeper into their own damnation. If this descent into the heart of conspiracy grips you, imagine the chill of the ritual itself. Stick with this story, because the forces these men are about to unleash will change their lives forever. And if you believe that true power cannot be cursed or bought, let me know in the comments what you think is Traoré's greatest shield. Don't forget to subscribe, because the climax of this spiritual war is a lesson for the entire world. The journey was a descent, not just in altitude from the elevated plateau of the capital city, but a descent in time, a descent in reality. The sleek, black SUV, a symbol of their power and privilege, looked alien as it left the paved roads behind. The city's hum gave way to the whispering of tall grasses. The polished glass towers were replaced by ancient baobab trees that looked like silent, knowing old men. They were entering a different BurkinaFaso. The one that existed long before colonial maps were drawn, a land that pulsed with an energy they had forgotten but which their ancestors knew intimately. They traveled for hours, guided by a local man whose silence was more unnerving than any threat. He was their guide into the liminal space, the world between worlds. Finally, they arrived at a small, isolated village. It wasn't on any map. The huts were made of mud and thatch, the same way they had been for 1,000 years. The air smelled of wood smoke and damp earth. Here, their money meant little. Their suits were a costume. Their authority was a joke. Here, another kind of power reigned. The Bakr's hut was set apart from the others, at the edge of a dark, menacing grove of trees. There were no guards, no fences, but an invisible barrier of fear kept the villagers at a distance. As they approached, the fixer, the man who had arranged this meeting, wiped a bead of sweat from his brow. Even he, a man who had stared down death, felt a primal fear clutch at his heart. They entered the hut. The darkness inside was absolute for a moment, before their eyes adjusted. The air was heavy with the smell of dried herbs, animal blood, and something else, something metallic and cold. The Bakr was seated on a low stool. He wasn't what they expected. Not a wild-eyed madman, but a figure of intense, terrifying stillness. His face was a roadmap of ritual scars, his eyes two black holes that seemed to see not just their faces, but the rot in their souls. He didn't speak. He simply watched them, letting the silence stretch, letting them unravel. The politician, ever the smooth talker, finally broke the silence. "We have come a long way to seek your unique talents," he began, his voice sounding thin and hollow in the small space. The Bakr remained silent. He just stared. The magnate, impatient and used to being in charge, stepped forward. He opened a briefcase filled with stacks of cash. "We will pay you handsomely," he said. "We have a problem. A man. We need him removed. Quietly. Permanently." The Bakr's eyes flickered to the money, then back to their faces, unimpressed. Then, for the first time, he spoke. His voice was like the rasp of stone on stone. "You think you can buy death?" The men were taken aback. This wasn't part of the transaction they had envisioned. "Everything has a price," the politician stammered. "Indeed," the Bakr rasped. "But the spirits do not care for your paper. They demand a more personal tribute. To curse a man of great destiny, a man protected by a great spirit, that requires a great sacrifice. A powerful anchor to draw the misfortune to him." He looked from one man to the other, his gaze lingering. "To attack his life, you must offer a piece of your own." The conspirators exchanged nervous glances. This was not the simple, clean transaction they wanted. "What do you mean?" the fixer asked, his voice steady. "To unravel his fate, you must each weave a thread of your own into the curse," the backer explained, his voice hypnotic. "The curse needs a conduit, a piece of the target and a piece of the sender." He pointed a long, bony finger at the magnate. "Your wealth is your lifeblood. You will provide the gold for the ritual. Not bought gold. The very first piece of gold you ever found, the one you keep as a good luck charm. Your foundation stone. It will be used to poison his prosperity." The magnate's face went pale. He knew the piece the backer spoke of. A small, raw nugget he'd kept in his safe for 40 years. It was his most prized possession. The backer then turned to the politician. "Your voice is your power. Your words are your weapons. You will write his name on the scroll, and with it, you will whisper the incantation I give you. You will pour the power of your own throat into the curse, to silence his." Finally, he looked at the fixer. "You are the link between their world and his. You will provide the most important piece. Something he has touched. Something that holds his essence. The piece of clothing, a pen, a strand of hair. This will be the arrow that carries the poison. But in providing it, you tie yourself to the outcome. You become the shepherd of the curse." The price was laid bare. It was not just money. It was a piece of their identity, their foundation, their power, their connection. They were being asked to invest themselves, personally and spiritually, into this act of malice. In their arrogance, they saw it as a necessary cost. A clever way to ensure the spell's potency. They did not understand the cosmic law they were invoking. What you send out, you are bound to. They were forging the weapon that would be used against them. After a moment of tense silence, they agreed. Greed and hatred are powerful blindfolds. They left the hut, leaving the briefcase of money and a promise to return with the requested items. As they walked back to their car, the air felt colder. The world seemed less solid. They had made a pact not just with a sorcerer, but with their own destruction. They thought they were commissioning an assassination. In reality, they had just signed their own death warrants. The backer watched them leave from the darkness of his hut, a faint, almost imperceptible smile on his scarred lips. The spirits would be fed tonight. One way or another. The night of the ritual was moonless. A thick, oppressive blanket of clouds choked the sky, mirroring the suffocating atmosphere inside the backer's hut. The conspirators were back. They had brought their tributes. The magnate, his hand trembling slightly, placed the small, dull gold nugget on the dirt floor. It felt cold, dead, no longer a symbol of his fortune but a harbinger of its end. The politician held a small scroll, his knuckles white. The fixer laid down a small, folded handkerchief, subtly stolen from an event where Traoré had been present. The backer took the items without a word. The ceremony began. He moved with a slow, deliberate grace that was terrifying to watch. He took a lump of river clay, wet and dark, and began to mold it. His fingers, long and spidery, worked with an unnatural speed. A shape began to form. A human shape. Crude but recognizable. He took the handkerchief and tore a strip from it, wrapping it around the doll's neck. He took the single strand of hair they had managed to procure and pressed it into the doll's head. The connection was made. He then motioned to the politician. "His name," he rasped. "Write his name. And as you write, picture his downfall. See him weak, confused, abandoned." The politician took a quill dipped in a dark, viscous ink that smelled faintly of blood. His hand shook as he wrote the name, Ibrahim Traoré. With each letter, he poured his hate into the parchment. Next, the backer took the magnate's gold nugget. He placed it in a small crucible and set it over a strange, green flame. The gold began to melt, but it didn't glow with a warm, yellow light. It turned dark, oily, like liquid shadow. "With this," the backer chanted, his voice dropping to a low drone, "we poison his wellspring. We turn his prosperity to ash. We make his nation's treasures a source of strife, not strength." He poured the molten, darkened gold over the clay doll's chest. It hissed and steamed, leaving a black, ugly scar. The air grew colder. A wind began to howl outside, though the night had been still. The candles flickered violently, their flames dancing as if in a gale. The conspirators felt a pressure in their ears, a deep, unsettling vibration that seemed to emanate from the very earth beneath them. The Bakr picked up the doll, now grotesquely scarred and bound. He began to chant. It was a language none of them knew, yet the meaning was terrifyingly clear. The words were blades. Each syllable was a drop of poison. He spoke of failure, a betrayal, of a mind turning against itself, of a voice choked into silence, of a body succumbing to a nameless disease. He handed the doll to the politician. "Speak the words I taught you," he commanded. "Seal the pact. Give the curse your voice so that it may steal his." The politician, his face slick with sweat, took the doll. It felt unnaturally cold, heavy. He opened his mouth, and the words the Bakr had taught him came out, a hoarse whisper. It was a litany of damnation. As he spoke the final word, a sharp pain shot through his own throat, as if he had swallowed glass. He choked, stumbling back. The Bakr seized the doll. He held it high. "It is done," he shrieked, his voice suddenly immense, filling the hut, pressing down on them. "The serpent is coiled. The poison is brewed. It now seeks its target. He is marked. By sunset tomorrow, the decay will begin. The world will see a strong man crumble." He then did something they didn't expect. He took a sharp knife and made a small cut on the finger of each conspirator, letting a single drop of their blood fall onto the doll. "A final offering," he hissed. "So the spirits know who to thank." They were too terrified to resist. They didn't realize they weren't being thanked. They were being tagged, marked as the origin point, the return address for the curse. They fled the hut, scrambling into their expensive car, desperate for the sterile, predictable world they had left behind. They drove away at high speed, leaving the village, the sorcerer, and the darkness behind them. Or so they thought. They were giddy with a terrible, triumphant fear. They had done it. They had unleashed a power that could not be stopped. They had condemned Ibrahim Traoré. They sat in their silent, air-conditioned car, each man lost in his own thoughts, feeling the phantom thrum of the ritual in his veins. They were convinced they were victorious. They were fools. They hadn't opened a door for a demon to attack their enemy. They had opened a door into their own souls, and the demon was now inside the house. The countdown had begun, but not for the man in the red beret. It had begun for them. The next day, the sun rose over Ouagadougou with a fierce, defiant brilliance. It was the day the curse was supposed to take hold. The day Ibrahim Traoré was supposed to falter, to show the first signs of the spiritual decay inflicted upon him. The conspirators waited. They watched the news, listened to the radio, their agents on standby, waiting for a report of the president's sudden illness, a confused speech, a cancelled appearance. But the news that came was not of weakness. It was of strength. Traoré was not hidden away in the palace, succumbing to a mysterious ailment. He was out. He was among his people. An unscheduled visit to a newly opened community farm, a project he had personally championed. The images that flooded the airwaves were not of a man cursed. They were of a man blessed. He stood on the back of a truck, not with a prepared speech, but with a heart full of passion. The sun beat down on his red beret. He wasn't shouting. He didn't need to. His voice, the very voice the politician had tried to curse into silence, was clear and resonant. It carried over the crowd, not with the force of a commander, but with the warmth of a brother. "They want us to believe we are weak," he declared, his gaze sweeping over the faces of the farmers, the workers, the mothers and children who had gathered to see him. "They want us to believe we cannot feed ourselves, that we cannot govern ourselves, that we cannot defend ourselves. They tell us that our destiny must be written in foreign languages, in foreign boardrooms. I look at you today and I see the truth. The truth is in your hands, that work this soil. The truth is in your hearts, that beat with the love of this nation. We are not weak. We are a mighty river, and we are finally flowing in the right direction." The crowd erupted. It was a roar of pure, unadulterated love and belief. It was more than just political support. It was a spiritual fortress. Each cheer, each cry of his name, was a brick in a wall of psychic energy so powerful, so pure, that the small, twisted curse sent from the Bakker's hut was utterly insignificant. Imagine that curse. A tiny, venomous serpent slithering through the spiritual plane. It follows the scent of its target, the essence of the stolen handkerchief. It finds him. But as it rears up to strike, it slams into a wall of light. A dome of collective will, woven from the hopes and prayers of millions of people. It is a shield not of magic, but of love. A shield not of incantation, a shield of popular sovereignty. The curse, repelled, recoiled in confusion. It was a weapon designed to kill a man, not to fight an entire nation's spirit. It was an arrow of pure malice, and it had just bounced off an impenetrable fortress. And like any arrow, when it bounces, it doesn't just fall to the ground. It flies back, tumbling through the air, seeking a new target. An arrow of poison doesn't care who it hits, as long as it finds a home. And this curse, charged with the blood of its senders, knew exactly where to go. It began its journey home. At that very moment, a different kind of drama was unfolding. A physical assassination attempt, planned to coincide with the curse, was in motion. A lone gunman, paid by the conspirators, was meant to take a shot during the public appearance. But a series of bizarre events unfolded. The gunman's rifle jammed inexplicably. A sudden gust of wind kicked up a cloud of red dust, completely obscuring his view at the critical moment. A scuffle broke out in the crowd nearby, drawing the attention of security forces, who noticed the suspicious man and apprehended him before he could even aim properly. It was dismissed as luck, as incompetence. But it wasn't. It was a physical manifestation of the same protective energy. The man was shielded. The plot had failed on every level. The conspirators, hidden away in their dark rooms, received the news with disbelief, which quickly curdled into fear. The man was not weaker. He was stronger. The attempt had failed. And then, the phone calls began. The first was to the mining magnate. It was his portfolio manager. A stock he had invested heavily in a foreign market, had crashed overnight. A political scandal on the other side of the world had wiped out a third of his fortune in a single morning. He slammed the phone down, his heart pounding. It was bad luck, he told himself. A coincidence. But it was only the beginning. The serpent was coming home to roost. The backfire had begun. The unraveling was not a single, dramatic explosion. It was a slow, creeping rot. A disease that consumed them from the inside out, each symptom a grotesque parody of the curse they had tried to inflict on another. The serpent was eating its own tail, and they were the body. The magnate's financial troubles cascaded. His coincidence turned into a pattern. A cargo ship carrying his refined metals mysteriously lost power and ran aground, a total loss. A fire broke out in his largest processing plant, caused by what investigators called freak electrical surges. His investors, spooked by the sudden, inexplicable string of disasters, pulled out. The man whose entire identity was built on his Midas touch was now watching everything he touched turn to dust. The curse he had fueled with his foundation stone of gold was now poisoning his own prosperity, turning his wealth to ash, just as the Bakker had chanted. He became paranoid, frantic, seeing conspiracies everywhere, trusting no one. His empire was crumbling. Then came the politician. He woke up one morning with a tickle in his throat. He thought nothing of it. But it grew worse. By midday, his voice was a hoarse rasp. He went to the doctor, who was baffled. There was no infection, no inflammation. His vocal cords were, for all intents and purposes, perfectly healthy. Yet, he could barely speak above a whisper. The man whose power was his voice, his ability to charm, to command, to lie, was now effectively mute. The curse he had sealed with his own whisper, the power he had tried to pour into the doll to silence Traoré, had recoiled and settled in his own larynx. He was trapped in a prison of silence, his greatest weapon turned against him. He could attend meetings, but not speak. He could plot, but not persuade. He was a ghost at his own table. The most terrifying fate was reserved for the fixer. The man who had provided the physical link, the handkerchief. He began to feel unwell. A strange, phantom pain. A deep, chilling cold that no blanket could warm. He started having nightmares. Not just bad dreams, but vivid, waking terrors. He would see the Bakker's face in crowds. He would smell the acrid smoke of the ritual in his own clean, expensive home. And then he started seeing the doll. The crude clay effigy. He would glimpse it out of the corner of his eye, sitting on a chair, lying on his pillow. He knew it wasn't real, but the terror was absolute. He was the shepherd of the curse, as the Bakker had said. And now, the curse was his constant, malevolent companion. His mind, once his sharpest tool, began to fray. He was being hunted by his own creation. The conspirators, once united in their arrogant plot, were now isolated in their private hells. They didn't dare speak to each other about what was happening. To admit it was to admit the truth, that they had meddled with forces they did not understand, and that those forces had turned on them with a terrible, poetic justice. Their plot had failed to harm Traoré in the slightest, but it had succeeded, spectacularly, in destroying them. And what of Ibrahim Traoré? He remained focused. He continued his work, touring the country, launching new initiatives, speaking to his people. If he was aware of the dark energies that had been sent his way, he gave no sign. He was too busy building a nation to be concerned with the petty hatreds of broken men. His shield was not a magical amulet or a counter-ritual. His shield was his purpose. His shield was his integrity. His shield was the undeniable, unshakable love of his people. He was a man walking in the sun, and the creatures of the dark could not touch him. The story spread, not on the official news, but in the whispers of the markets, in the tales told by elders. The story of the curse that backfired. It became a modern-day fable, a cautionary tale, a testament to the belief that good is not just a moral position, but a protective force. It solidified Traoré's position not just as a political leader, but as a figure of immense spiritual and symbolic power. A man who was, in the eyes of his people, untouchable. He was the living embodiment of their national sovereignty, and no curse forged in the fires of greed and neo-colonialism could ever hope to break him. This story is more than a thrilling narrative of magic and politics. It's a profound lesson on the nature of power. For centuries, power has been defined as control. Control of armies, of economies, of narratives. The men who conspired against Traoré were masters of this kind of power. They lived in a world of force, of manipulation, of secret deals struck in the dark. But they came up against a different kind of power. A higher power. It wasn't the power of a Bakker's curse, for that is just another tool of control, born from fear. The true power was the one Traoré embodied. It's the power that comes not from taking, but from giving. The power that comes not from fear, but from love. The power that is not held over people, but is given freely by the people. Think about the symbolism. They tried to poison his prosperity with gold, and their own fortunes evaporated. They tried to silence his voice, and their own throats were closed. They tried to attack his essence, and their own minds and bodies decayed. The universe, it seems, has a morbid sense of irony. Hatred is never a straight arrow. It is a boomerang. Malice is a poison that rots the vessel in which it is stored. Ibrahim Traoré's continued success, his calm demeanor in the face of incredible pressure, is the ultimate testament to this principle. He doesn't need to engage in their shadow wars. He doesn't need to answer their hatred with more hatred. His victory is in every school that is built, every farm that is irrigated, every child that is fed. His power is in the dignity he restores to his people, a dignity that becomes a shield for the entire nation. This is the ultimate takeaway. True strength isn't about the enemies you can destroy. It's about the future you can build. True magic isn't in the dark rituals performed in secret huts. It's in the collective will of a people rising up to claim their destiny. It's in the unwavering spirit of a leader who serves not himself, but the generations to come. The men who tried to curse him believed they were fighting one man. They were wrong. They were fighting the soul of a nation. And that is a battle no sorcerer can win, and no amount of money can buy. The story of Ibrahim Traoré is a story for our time. It's a reminder that the old structures of power are more fragile than they appear, and that the human spirit, when awakened, is the most powerful force on earth. If this message resonates with you, if you believe in the power of true leadership and national dignity, then support this channel. Subscribe so you don't miss other stories of the heroes who are reshaping our world. Click the link in the description to become an insider, to join a community that seeks truth and celebrates the unconquerable spirit of humanity. Don't be left behind in the conversation. Be part of the movement.